Hi, everyone. Welcome to Fire and Forte and Sustainability Week. I am with the founder of an incredible business I'm so excited to share. And I've already said to her that I am going to show off the fact that I've worked with her before. So I just want to introduce Jeroo Doodhmal to the audience. Hi, Jeroo.
Hi, Hannah. Nice to be on your show.
So great to speak. We worked with each other 9 years ago. We worked out possibly even 10 in London. And are you still based in London?
Yes, very much.
Yeah, great. Right in the middle of the action. Now, you have been very busy doing a complete career pivot since we worked with each other. So, I would love you to introduce your brilliant business, Pip and Henry, to the audience and talk us through what the journey was to founding your own business.
Sure. So I have founded a brand called Pip Henry. We make beautifully crafted, eco-focused shoes for children. And this is a business that I've been building for about 2 or 3 years now, but we've really launched our first full summer collection this season. So it's really exciting times for us. And yeah, I suppose in terms of my journey, you and I met at Hannah Sainsbury's, and that was close to a decade ago. I then moved on to Barclays and, stayed on in the corporate world for a while. But then I had my daughter in 2017. And, I remember showing her, things like David Attenborough documentaries and trying to take her on nature walks and getting more excited about nature and plants and animals. I'm quite, sustainably minded that way myself in my personal life. But, I was shocked by the sheer amount of stuff that entered our home after having a kid. It wasn't something I'd considered before. You suddenly you have this mountain of like furniture and cutlery and toys and books and clothes and shoes. And it just suddenly seems to take over your home. And a lot of the things that you actually end up getting or gifting or buying yourself, you don't use for very long. Sometimes you don't use them at all. I can't tell you the number of clothes that I had for her, which I was saving for a special occasion. And by the time the special occasion came, she'd outgrown it and the label was still on it and I didn't know what to do with it. And I felt very guilty about, having it in the first place. So, all of that just sort of got me thinking about the sheer waste generated by households who have children. And, I started looking for eco-friendly products in various, for clothes and for furniture and for, accessories and things like that. And I could see a real gap in the footwear space for kids. So you do have brands like Allbirds and Beja who are doing really fantastic stuff with sustainable footwear for adults, but there's nothing really concerted happening in the children's footwear space. And I started researching that and I learned, how children outgrow their shoes every 3 to 4 months in the early years of their lives. The average British household, family owns about 15 pairs of shoes for their kid every single year. 80 million pairs of shoes are bought by British families every single year in just the UK alone. And unfortunately, 85% of those shoes then end up in landfill. And because of the materials that they're made of, they just leach chemicals and toxins into the earth and water for decades, centuries, even thousands of years to come. And so I could see a real problem in footwear industry, and I could see that our children were being unwitting contributors to that situation. And that's what sort of led to the birth of Pip and Henry.
It's a but really interesting story from personal experience. And as you were talking through, I thought about how tempting it is to buy my nieces and nephews very cute little trainers. In fact, it was the first thing that I bought my twin nephews, little Converse trainers.
Yeah.
They were so cute. Is there a big proportion of that trainers? And this may be a certain look to get the perfect photo or the perfect look.
We live in an Instagram kind of world, don't we, where we want to look perfect and portray this perfect life and, oh, look at my cute baby. And, I got sucked into that as well. You do want your children to look well put together. And it's tempting when they're tiny, they look so cute in everything that you buy. So you want to color coordinate their outfit with their clothes, with their shoes and, little accessories and hairbands and things like that. So it is very tempting. You can see how, parents could very easily spend so much on their children's clothes and footwear and accessories. And so you can't actually change consumer behavior. I don't think it's fair to kind of ask consumers to change their behaviors entirely. I think it's up to the industry to kind of make differences in the way in which they manufacture products, in the way in which they market products, in the sort of business models they create and put out there into the world to help consumers be more sustainably focused while still enjoying their children.
That's a good point because you can only buy what's on offer. But I also wonder if there's much education out there that maybe consumers would make a different decision if they knew the problem that they were causing. So does Pip and Henry come with an element of education for consumers?
Absolutely. So education is something I hold really dear. And actually, I think it's great to educate kids, the next generation, on how to be more mindful about the environment. Because, I feel like I've had to change so many behaviors that were embedded in deeply rooted habits that are really hard to change. But if we catch them young, then that next generation can kind of become your eco champion and kind of really help move the needle. And kids these days are, so much more mature and knowledgeable about these things anyway. They're learning about it in school. They're living that through the values that are portrayed in the media and through, brands that are focusing on this. So I'm really, really passionate about children's education. And that's what led me to kind of write a few storybooks with our characters, Pip and Henry. Pip is a little girl, Henry's her dinosaur friend. And, they were inspired by my daughter and her love for dinosaurs. And I just thought it's a really cool way to kind of engage that young generation, young minds. They kind of learn through storytelling best. Yeah. And especially if they see themselves reflected in those stories, that engages them even further. And so I created these little adventures that Pip and Henry went on. And, they organized a beach cleanup and they learned about the difference between good bugs and naughty bugs. And they learned about landfills and why those are bad and things like that. And it's just a fun way to get kids engaged on the topic and talking about it.
I love that. Did the books come before the shoes, or were the books a very conscious decision to drive awareness of the shoes?
Well, they were never intended to come before the shoes. So when I started thinking about Pip and Henry and I, researched space and I found a manufacturer and I did a lot of material research and invested lots of time in it. And then I said, hey, this is something that I want to dedicate my entirety of my days to. And I quit my job at Barclays. And then COVID hit a couple of months later and I suddenly found myself in total lockdown. The factory was shut and I didn't have shoes to sell. And so I used that COVID lockdown period to write those storybooks because I thought, okay, what can I do? I don't have products, but I can still build my mission. I can still talk about what we want to do, why sustainable footwear is important. And I can still, foster that mindset in the young minds that I want to change. And so yeah, I started writing those storybooks there. I'm illustrated. I developed a little shoe box, which is actually designed to be a children's game that takes kids are on this journey around the home to use waste in their house to do arts and crafts and things like that. So I spent time really developing that creative side of the business that really engages kids in a fun way on something that can actually potentially be quite a serious topic.
Yeah, and also how clever of you to use that time to build the brand, because I imagine that now that you've got shoes to sell, it's harder to find that time to actually get as creative, isn't it? But you've built up this brand and these characters, which I imagine you keep coming back to. Is that the case?
Absolutely. I mean, it wasn't the intention, but because I had that time, I actually focused on it 100%. And, initially I saw COVID as this massive mean thing that happened to me, but a disaster. But actually, in hindsight, it was a blessing in disguise. But yeah, I mean, it is something that is a very core part of our proposition and our branding. We don't want to just be a brand that pushes product out to people. We're about a mission. We want to change and help children take their first steps more mindfully into the world. And that whether that's with the shoes that they wear on their feet or the attitude they wear on their sleeves, it's something that I hold really close to my heart. So yeah, it
It's
was a
very
key.
Yeah, it's brilliant. It's really compelling as a mission, but I'm wondering how it was moving from quite a corporate career into a founder. I mean, COVID, what a bit of bad luck. I bet that was a few really horrible weeks trying to work out what to do about that. But what were the first steps that you took and what was the key milestones, I suppose, to actually build up your own business and step away from that corporate mindset?
I think it was a journey I took step by step. So whilst I was at Barclays, actually whilst I was on maternity leave, I was already thinking about what I wanted to do, when I got back to work. And I knew I wanted to do something myself. And I've always run side hustles through my entire life. I think the first business I had was, at the age of 17. I ran my own little candle making business while still in school. So, I've always had that sort of streak and desire to do something on my own. At the time, I started building a business where I was trying to sell sustainable household products on Amazon. And so I was doing the rounds of the trade shows and getting more into material science and, really understanding what's sustainable out there and what isn't. And so that kind of gave me a little bit of confidence around, you know, am I a credible voice in this eco space? Do I really know what is sustainable? How do you define sustainability? How do you talk about it? What are people trending towards, etc. And when I built Pip Henry, I knew nothing about footwear. So I did a 1 week course at the LCF to understand footwear and footwear making. And, it's actually quite a complex product, shoes. I didn't realize how complex they are. The average shoe can have anywhere between 20 to 50 different component materials in it, which isn't something you think of, as a lay consumer. So yeah, I did spend a lot of time in sort of understanding the industry, speaking to people, going and visiting manufacturing factories, etc., before I actually then quit my job and did this full time. So I'd already got quite a bit of the business plan and the business idea developed. I dropped down from 5 days to 4 days first with Barclays, so I could spend some time working on Pip and Henry on the side before I then had the confidence to do it full time. So I would say I think that was the best thing I could do, is sort of give myself the confidence to really focus on this full time.
It's a great guidance because going out, researching what's out there, anybody can do and anyone can sign up to a course. So if there is something that really sparks your interest, so if someone's watching this and there is something in a very similar way to what happened to you, something in the home or something in their lifestyle, which they know feels that needs to be improved for the environment or living sustainably, then actually researching is the best way to start, as well as starting to understand what's out there already. Like you found that there was a gap in the market for footwear, and that was through that research, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not just, the gap in the market for sustainable footwear, but, what are parents looking for when it comes to buying shoes for their kids? How do they think about comfort? How do they think about design? How do they think about style? Like all of that sort of stuff. Of course, I'm a mom, and so I sort of have a lens and a view on it, but that doesn't mean that the wider consumer base reflects my view. And so just taking the time to kind of do that, speaking to moms, at the time, I remember doing a few depth interviews by research days coming to use, in the early days, where I would just go out and speak to moms and, ask about the shoes they had bought for their kids and when they bought them and why they bought them and, the decision-making process and all of that sort of stuff, gold dust for a new business.
And you can do that in the school playground. So that's a little bit helpful as well, or the nursery playground. You mentioned about the credibility in the sustainable space, and that is something that I've heard of quite a lot, that there's this mystery around sustainability that maybe you need to know more about the science to actually be credible in that space. And maybe that's because there is quite a lot of information out there, or you think that you need to know about all of the different technologies that are out there. How did you gain what you believe to be a level of credibility and confidence in your knowledge around sustainability so that you could talk to consumers and to industry about being a sustainable brand?
I think the first thing to say is, there could be this, we could put pressure on ourselves and say, we need to know everything there is to know about eco-friendly products, and we need to be the best brand out there, and we need to get everything 100% right from day one. And actually, the first thing I did was, put my hands up and say, actually, I don't know anything about sustainable footwear. I need to go and educate myself. So I went and spoke to, university academics and, looked up a lot of research papers on the space, but then also, going out and to trade shows that are focused on materials and material science and development and seeing what's out there and sort of just putting myself out there, learning about the new things and trends in the industry. But also sustainability can be defined from so many different lenses, right? You can look at the materials that you use in your shoes. You can look at where you source those materials from and the carbon footprint that you leave behind if you sort of import and move materials from one country to another. You can look at, the education piece, which is very different. You can look at how you can recycle the shoes once they've reached the end of their life. So there are so many lenses that you can take to being a sustainable brand. And we've tried to look at quite a few of them actually through Pip and Henry. So we do look at materials, we look at design principles and how we can design for longer use. We look at recycling, we look at education and content. So I suppose what is really crucial in this industry is to maintain transparency and being honest about where you're focusing on and what you've had success with and what you're still working towards. And I think that's where you kind of build credibility with your consumer base. If you put yourself out there and say, we're the best we ever could be, I don't actually think there's a final best. There's always something you can improve on. And I don't think that's a credible statement.
And it's a relatively new field as well, where there might not be a solution to recycling a certain part of the shoe, I imagine, or it might be
Exactly.
difficult to actually source a certain material, is it?
Absolutely. So recycling, for example, is really complex with footwear, because of the way in which shoes are made. They're glued, laminated, stitched together. And like I said, there's 20 to 50 different components. It becomes really hard to recycle shoes. So actually, shoes today aren't recycled, they're downcycled. So they are sort of shredded and then compressed to form things like playground foam or insulation, which is still not bad versus dumping shoes in landfill, but it's not the best solution. So we're actually in Pip Henry, we've invested quite a bit in R&D. We're lucky we've won a few grants to support us on this journey, where we're looking to develop shoes that can be split into their component parts more cleanly, which can then allow for you to recycle the rubbers, the fabrics, the leathers, the hardware separately, and then therefore reuse them more easily than currently you can with shoes. So, every part of sustainability with shoes and footwear is so complex, and that's something I've learned over the years. But, we can only keep trying.
That might be why there were no other sustainable footwear brands for children out there. There's 20 components to figure out.
Exactly. I mean, it's the uppers, the laces, the linings, the foams, the soles. There's so many different layers within the sole. There's the Velcro straps, the elasticated laces. There's just so many components, and I'm sure many more that I haven't even thought of right now.
What a challenge you undertook, but you've been seeking innovation and obviously coming up with elements of innovation to solve for some of that. So the recycling solution that you found, was that something that you and the team created, or was that something that you'd found elsewhere?
It's something that we're still working on. So we're working in partnership with a couple of really innovative labs that focus on footwear innovation and design. So we're working on two things. One is, how do we create those shoes that can be disassembled into their component parts more cleanly? And the other is, we're looking at how we can create a shoe that can grow with a growing child's foot. So you don't have to throw out shoes every 3 to 4 months. You could potentially throw them out every 9 to 10 months, or maybe even longer. So we've yet to crack both of those, and we're working really hard at creating a solution that that keeps design and recycling and end of life at its heart. So we're really trying to design for circularity rather than waiting for the shoe to get to its end of life and then trying to figure out what to do with it.
That would be an absolute game changer, wouldn't it? On so many different levels, because actually not only is it an issue for the environment, it's an issue for family and budgets who might end up, because the children grow so quickly, they buy more and more shoes because they have to, but they might get cheaper quality because they're having to buy them so frequently. I'm imagining that's a challenge for families.
Absolutely. So there's, a tendency to buy cheaper plasticky, you know, shoes that are made out of lots of plastic bits compressed together. And, like I said, sometimes the onus should really be on businesses to change the way in which they operate and the way in which they put products out there to consumers, because at the end of the day, consumers will buy what's easiest, most cost effective, and looks nice and appeals to them on that level. They don't necessarily think of sustainability as a first purchase decision driver.
Well, I'm imagining that you're hearing a lot from customers at the moment, because I'm super delighted to see that you've currently got a pop-up in London's John Lewis, one of many pop-ups. So in which branch of John Lewis are you
In
in?
Westfield.
So
In
you are
Westfield.
in one of the main John Lewis's in London. That's absolutely brilliant. So can you talk to us about your partnership with John Lewis?
Then we do pop-ups with John Lewis from time to time. We've been in their Sloane Square branch in Bluewater in Westfield. And actually, I find that really a useful exercise, because we get to put our shoes out there in front of customers. We get to see the response and the reaction we have. It's so much fun, watching people pass by our little pop-up and going, oh, how cute little baby children, even if they don't have kids, because they are, of course, really adorable, cute little products. But, it's really a wonderful opportunity for us to talk about our brand, our mission, why we exist, why we're creating the kind of products that we are, and just get sort of amazing feedback on design and style and our mission and rich and our pricing and all sorts of stuff. So like I said, it's really, really useful to put ourselves in front of consumers and get feedback, direct feedback in terms of what's working, what's not. And these pop-ups are an amazing way for us to do that.
And to see them
So it's very tiring, it's very hard. We're on our feet for 13 hours a day, but it's totally worth it.
I can imagine the conversations at the beginning of the day are really energizing, and by the end, you're thinking, okay, thank
Yeah.
you. Come back to me at 9 a.m. tomorrow. That would be helpful. That's brilliant. It's great to hear this partnership evolving with such a major retailer. I am now wondering what's next for Pip and Henry, and because you're online, aren't you? Are you hoping to actually go into physical stores on a more regular basis?
Yes, I mean, I suppose, we're looking at both options as a potential. So, of course, we want to build our own consumer base and we want to get to know our consumers and have a direct relationship with them. But equally, children's shoes are a product that parents like to touch and feel and, measure out their kids' shoe sizes and things like that. So, we're pursuing a couple of retailers as well. And hopefully by 2024, we will be in a couple of mainstream shoe shops as well.
Excellent. And hopefully with some other people supporting you in those shoe shops, so it's not just yourself and your team.
Definitely.
Now, on a personal level, would you be able to share the skills that you were able to transfer from your previous corporate career? And you've already mentioned some qualitative research, which came in handy, but also any
Yeah.
new skills that you might have picked up or that you would recommend to other people that are looking into maybe founding their own business based around sustainability.
I mean, of course, getting to know your consumer, keeping your consumer at the heart of your proposition. Those are the sorts of things that I've had ingrained in me through my corporate life, and I've taken with me through to Pip and Henry. I suppose just in terms of running your own business, I think the key thing to really develop is grit and determination, and really choosing something that you're passionate about, because there will be plenty of highs and the highs will feel amazing, but there will also be lots of lows. And so you need to have that passion and you need to have that drive that sees you through those periods. And I think that's potentially, the biggest driver of success for a startup. It's the ability to get up, to pivot, to, try new things, experiment, test, fail, learn, move on. I think that's so crucial to develop your own business, because you'll never get it right on day one. And I don't think you'll get it right on day 100 or day 1,000 either. You're constantly evolving and learning as you move along. So you've got to sort of develop that tenacity and that grit. But I guess also, just enjoying the process and seeing it as a learning opportunity and seeing every day as an opportunity to do something different. I mean, I do everything for my business, from packing shoes and running to the post office through to thinking of our wider strategy and developing our financial forecast, to designing the little prints that we have on our shoes, through to writing the books and getting designers to illustrate them. My days are never the same. And I've had to learn so many new skills along the way. I mean, I find it really fun and really exciting to do that. And that's what drove me to starting my own thing as well.
That's brilliant. And I'm wondering if it was a bit of a surprise when you've come to some new tasks that actually you're capable of doing so many things that you never even would have considered before.
Absolutely. Things like starting your own advertising campaigns or designing your own shoes or researching what colors would work in which seasons, or just down to legal stuff, trademarking, licensing, all of that sort of stuff. I never thought I'd get a chance to do so many different things over the course of one little job, quote unquote. So it's actually great fun, great learning experience.
Well, it's a brilliant business and it's so exciting. And I'm also, like I said earlier, I said I can't help but be extremely proud to know you and this really purpose-driven business that you've built. Where can people find the shoes? Are they available in other countries other than the UK or just the UK at the moment?
Yeah, we can ship abroad as well. We're predominantly a British business, so we advertise here. But there's no reason why someone in Australia couldn't buy a pair of shoes, and we'll happily ship them out to them. So you can find us on www.pipandhenry.com, and likewise on Instagram and Facebook as well.
Absolutely excellent. Wish you all the best. And I'll be in touch to buy my nephews some sustainable shoes as opposed to those cheap trainers because I now know where they are. Thank you so much for sharing your story. And it's a really inspirational story for anyone looking into setting up on their own or joining a similar business. So, really appreciate you joining us early morning while you've been on your feet selling shoes. So,
It's fun. Nice to catch up again after a while.
it's been great. We'll speak again soon. All the very best, Jeroo.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.